Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the March 15th Strategic Planning Meeting of the Regional Transportation Commission. At this time, we are going to call the meeting to order, and Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Neoma Jordan.
Here.
Ed Lawson. Here. Von Hartung.
Here.
Oscar Delgado.
Here.
Bob Lucy's not in attendance. Bill Thomas. Here. And Adam Spear.
Here.
We also have directors for the workshop. We've got Angela Reich, Stephanie Haddock, sorry, Amy Cummings, gotta look at everybody, Mark Maloney, and Brian Stewart. And we have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. At this time, we're going to move into the Pledge of Allegiance, and if we could have Vice Chair Lawson lead us in the pledge.
Yes, please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. At this time, Madam Clerk, we'll move into general public comment.
We did not receive any public comment for this meeting.
Thank you very much. Item 3, approval of the agenda. Director Thomas, do we have any modifications to the agenda?
No, Madam Chair, we don't.
May I get a motion?
So move. Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Director Thomas, item 4, workshop format and objectives.
Thank you, Chair Jordan. So I wanted to, before we get started, just lay out our expectations and thoughts about this workshop to help it be more productive. This is our annual strategic board staff discussion. It's an important first step in preparing our fiscal year 22 budget. The desired outcome is not to have you make any particular decisions today. Rather, it's to have a robust conversation as needed between the staff and the board on where we've been in the past year, where we're going, and for us to provide you sufficient knowledge such that you can give us policy direction at some point in the future when we bring forward action items for you to decide on. It's our opportunity to make you aware of and you to make us aware of issues of concern for us to focus on as we develop solutions and strategies to bring back for your action. Today's workshop, as we've structured it, is set up to have 10-minute presentations talking about transit, streets and highways, metropolitan planning function, and the FY22 budget preparation brief. And then we will close with then we'll have a presentation. We have about 20 minutes set aside for our federal lobbyists to call in at 11 a.m. and to give us a brief presentation on federal activities to help us form our federal program moving forward next year. The structure of this is that we'll close with a discussion on our proposed fiscal year 22 agency goals. And while certainly it's up to the board how you want to run the workshop, but at the end there, when we get to the goals, the thought would be that would be a good place to kind of bring everything back together and make sure that as we prepare the budget and as we prepare to move forward for a formal action later on our agency goals, that we would have an understanding of where the board is on these particular issues, or for you to bring forward issues maybe that we didn't capture. So if it pleases the board at this point, we're ready to move to the workshop.
All right, Madam Clerk, no public comment on that item?
No, Madam Chair, we didn't receive any public comment for the meeting at all.
Thank you very much. Item 5, workshop. Director Thomas.
So the first presentation we have is Mark Maloney's going to go through public transportation and operations. So Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. I guess, do we have a presentation? Thank you.
So a question, procedural question. Does the board wish to stop along the way with questions, wait till the end of the presentation for questions and comments? How do y'all feel? You wanted to get through the whole thing, and then we'll ask questions?
As a workshop, I'm comfortable if you want
You're
to stop
comfortable
me
with that?
throughout
Okay.
it, yeah.
Yeah, this isn't super formal.
It's supposed to be informal like
Okay.
last year, so,
There you go.
yeah. Works for me, thank you.
It's hard to see the light.
Nope. I think that's Brian's. We can go out of order if Brian wants to go first. If it's easier for Denise. No, I could. Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Might not be at the same quality level.
I can't do yours. I'm sorry. Did you? I'll try to make them really quick. Turn the 10 into 1.
Do what? That's Brian's. We're close. I probably got saved back in a different order. That one looks a little better. Thank you. All right. Let's see which one works. Ah, that one does work. All right. We are back on. All right. So, looking to do kind of a high-level overview of what we do, what's COVID done to us, where we're headed, where's our future, and kind of give a background of that. Try to hit some highlights, and again, stop me, ask whatever questions or any interest or any things you want me to take back and consider. Just go with that. On our kind of purpose of public transportation here, we obviously focus on improving access to jobs, essential services, reduce the number of automobile trips, and improve air quality. We found the improving access to jobs, essential services, especially essential services, became very prevalent in the last year with COVID, and we have some numbers that'll kind of match up to that. Our family of services. So we actually provide a lot of different and variations of services to try to meet the demands of Washoe County's ridership needs. We have obviously our fixed route and our paratransit. Our Flex Ride, which is a newer service, is gaining steam though. Obviously, COVID times is a difficult across the board in the way of ridership, but we do have 4 zones now in the Flex Ride. And I know last month there was some questions about the Flex Ride software. We are on our second series of software. We opened with Transloc, which is actually owned by Ford Motor Company, and they did our planning and our software to launch us into service. We moved over to an RFP process to go out to bid, and we ended up with Spare Labs. We actually did very well in the RFP. We had kind of the heavy hitters of bidders. We had Spare Labs, Via Mobility, Route Match, Rideco, Transloc again, and Cityway, which is a TransDev product. Since the software world in this is moving very quickly, we only did a 2-year contract. So around this time next year, we'll probably be looking at what's new and what's happening out there to be going out to bid again. Our van pool is a kind of the shining star for COVID. We actually are up to 240 vans. Previously, pre-COVID, we were just around 225, 228 or so. So it's a rare area that we actually expanded and increased service. So we're very happy about that. The other area was, I know it was a long time we talked about, was we actually, under our Washoe Senior Ride program, we actually were able to launch an Uber pilot. So our Washoe Senior Ride program, as you probably remember, is for our seniors, our veterans, and any ADA customers that we have to be able to use a subsidized taxi. And now they could also choose to do a subsidized Uber pilot. It's highly subsidized. They can go anywhere in Washoe County, and they get a new allotment every month. So it gives flexibility throughout the county for anyone who needs that emergency or needed medical or whatever trip they need, groceries and such. Our other is our 5310 program, which is a pass-through grant program. It's, right now, these are the 5 that we operate. They have a finish up of this federal fiscal year, so around September. We're right now doing a call for projects for the next round. So some of these names and projects will probably change, and we'll bring that back to you for approval as we go through that call of projects. The nice thing is with the vaccines, Washoe County Human Service Agencies has adjusted theirs to be able to do some vaccines traveling on that end of it. So instead of having an area that they kind of focused on, they're doing countywide now to be able to get extra people to be vaccinated. MTM, which is the state Medicaid transportation, is also doing vaccine traveling. And we just last week went in agreement with Uber to do, Uber's sponsoring to do some free vaccine trips. So it gives us an opportunity for those ones that fall through the holes of this, our existing service, to be able to get some of the vaccine stuff done too.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
So I know Director Thomas and I have talked about, this is great about bringing people to where the vaccines are. Have we, as the vaccines progress and don't need as much refrigeration, and it appears as though going into the neighborhoods to administer and deliver the vaccines is something that seems to be effective in other neighborhoods and other cities, is that something we've been looking at? Is, in other words, using our, our facilities and our buses to deliver the vaccines? I don't know the logistics or how that might work into the actual neighborhoods. Have we vetted that at all?
Yeah. We've been working very closely with the county. The county is not proposing that. What they are proposing is points of distribution, so pods, and we are working with them on a contract to do 4th Street Station. We have an open area there, so they are looking at different locations. And when we work with them, we usually try to get them on transit lines. So they're, right now, obviously, the fairgrounds is right where 5 and 15 has a stop right in front of it, so it's perfect. But with the rodeo coming, they're gonna be moving, I think, down the Airway area, which is close to our, within a quarter-mile walk of our Route 12 bus stop. So if the county does move towards wanting to do different points of distributions, we've been talking with them, and we'd work with them.
Madam Chair, if I might just jump on too, I think, I feel like it'd be safe to say that the board would want us to do whatever we can to assist in the vaccination of the community. So what we will do is we will work very closely with the health department, and at such point where they feel there might be some use of our our facilities or even our equipment to disperse it, we will certainly bring that back to the board to let you know. And to the extent there's any funding implications, we would make sure that you're aware of that. But my assumption is that you would like us to assist in any way we can to increase the dispersion of the vaccine.
Yes,
And correct on the
convenience.
executive director. So we actually have an agreement with the county for their point of distribution that we will bring to the board once they want us to pull the trigger on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. First, to dovetail on what you were talking about, I mean, if we're styled to take action anytime soon, I'd rather give you the okay to do that so that you don't have to bring it back to us and delay this process. I mean, that just seems inordinate to me. But that's just me. So I'd like to give that authorization so that when you're ready to pull the trigger, you pull the trigger.
I agree with that. I mean, I can envision a scenario. I can envision a scenario too where, in watching other cities that are struggling to maybe get the vaccine into the neighborhoods so the convenience and the accessibility is there. There may not be a front end, lengthy period of time where we can do that, but you may monitor where there's a food distribution pop-up where we can take our bus and the vaccine to that site and administer vaccines where the people are already gathering or within the neighborhood. So they're not having to take a bus twice or an Uber Lyft or whatever it is to get to a vaccine, but rather we're coming to them. So anyway, I too, like the other members, would want to give you whatever authority you need to make that happen and happen quickly. And I see our attorney over there is getting itchy. We're not making a motion.
I think because Adam's read the agreement we have between the county, and that there's liability and some other aspects that we would want the board to approve.
Also, Madam Chair, if I could just jump in. The balance today is being able to discuss broad topics and provide a broad range of discussion without giving specific action, but certainly everything that you say will be heard by staff and will be taken into consideration and brought back.
General direction,
Yeah.
Counselor, and I get that, to bring back to us. All I'm suggesting is
There was
as
no
as
motion
soon as,
made.
soon as we can, that's something I would certainly like to see. Mark, I just have a couple of quick questions, if I may, Madam Chair. Everything here is pre-COVID. Have we, and I know we have we calculated our losses, and are we prepared to ask the federal government for some CARES Act assistance, especially in transit?
We've actually received quite a bit, and I'm going to hit on that. You'll see shortly in the next slides what we've done on the financial side and been able to receive from CARES Act, and
Okay.
and also what COVID has done in the way of ridership.
Okay, yeah, no, I know it's dropped dramatically, but I'd like to, the dollars are there, let's go. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Maloney.
And oddly enough, transit usually doesn't get dollars, and we were actually one of the first ones to get dollars, so we are in better shape than usually transit ends up in this end of it. So basically sales tax, this is our revenue chart back from 2006 all the way up to where we're at and projecting for the coming year. And so you've got the purple line, which is our quarter cent, which goes 100% to public transportation. The yellow bars are our flexible 1/8 sales tax. And you can see we took a couple months of a dive on sales tax, but it rebounded very well in Washoe County. Therefore, our income stream on sales tax remained very strong. And this does not have a recession built into it. So we're hopeful that if we do have a recession, it's very light. Because if you look at the 2006, basically it took till 2016 to recover back to where we were on sales tax. So we would not want to see a 10-year dip like that again. It was very crippling. So we're hopeful that if there is a recession, it's very light in this end of it. But right now, sales tax, we are doing very well, especially considering the COVID time. And statewide and Clark County are not doing as well, so we're very fortunate up here in Washoe to have the diverse spending that we do have on the sales tax. Passengers fares is a different story. As Commissioner Hartong pointed out, ridership drops means our passengers fares drop. So we lost about 2 million last year, and we were projecting another 2 million drop in this coming year, or this year. And then probably a slow growth back as we return our ridership, hopefully back to the levels we were pre-COVID. What this all means is a really busy chart. But the bottom line on this is where we'll get to kind of answering that question. So the 2020 actual up there, which is their first column, we received about $20 million in CARES Act on the first round, which was a significant boost. So therefore, it allowed us to roll over and basically stay heavily in the black and actually have dollars to be able to roll over, because the third from the bottom line is our Villanova replacement with the Spaghetti Bowl Phase 4 around 2036. If it stays on, we lose our facility. So it's about a $70 million with property and everything. So we were proposing a $10 million savings each year. So that third line from the bottom starts compiling and putting those dollars in savings so that we can purchase and build a new transit facility and move before we lose ours. So you'll see that across the board. But the CARES Act basically carried us for these couple of years. It helps us to be able to start saving and gets us to the point at the end there, 2005, second to last column, where we've kind of put away the $50 million. And then we kind of return to our normal, which is a slightly below the, we spend more than we actually get, except for grants and such that we go after. So overall, for the next 5 years, it's looking very good. This does not incorporate this next round, because when we did this chart, it did not have the current administration that was just passed. But that is promising to be another large chunk, which would definitely put us in a great position for moving forward. Also, as we move into, at the end of the presentation, we'll talk about our next 5-year plan. Depending on what comes in and when, that could be utilized for some additional service or facility improvements or along those lines. This just gives you an easy way to look at it. The red line is our spend. The dark blue line is what we get in revenue. So you can see we spend slightly more than we get in, and that's where our grants make up for a lot, and this is where obviously the CARES Act has helped us a lot in that as well, to give us that first boost in those first 2 years. There it goes. And here's the kind of to answer the question about our ridership. The top dark blue line is us. Yes, we hit hard, but we've hit nowhere near as hard as the rest of the nation. All the dash lines, the red dash, the small dashes, and the long dashes are based on different populations around the nation, but overall you can see everyone else was far below us. They took a deeper hit, and they also have not recovered as quickly. So we've stayed pretty flat around that 65% of our ridership still being retained, somewhere between 32 and 35% each month being down. We're definitely hopeful as we kind of move out of COVID, vaccines happen, and we free things up, that we'll see this come back. But it really came down to our essential workers, our essential medical trips, and our essential shopping trips were very large that we run on our system. So we did not lose as much ridership. And on this next chart, you can kind of see where our ridership normally is on trip purpose, and pretty much other recreational, social, and school is what we lost. We retained most of the shopping, medical, and work trips. So those are kind of our efforts of this coming year, is how do we get back that and how we get back on track, which is where we're at. So our ridership strategy is basically to market our new Virginia line extension that we just opened, market our services. We have a campaign starting right now that really focuses on the safety of our service and how safe we are, and return it's safe to come back to us. Market our Flex Ride pilots. Those we had very good luck originally pre-COVID because we really could get out into the community. It's been very difficult to get out in the community during COVID. So we want to definitely put a focus on that. We've got some new areas that need a lot of attention to get those people to understand how to use the service and get out and ride that service and how great the service is and the flexibility they have. We have a pilot coming for the Summit Park and Ride down to Lake Tahoe between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So we're looking forward to running that pilot and seeing how that goes. We're also looking this summer to expand the rapid service later into the PM. Right now it kind of peters out around 10 p.m. We want to be able to push that, hopefully with the opening of downtown and midtown and the events coming back, we can push that much more into the midnight 1 a.m. Or slightly later. But we're going to work on that this summer to put that out there. And again, as I talked about, our other is what we're focused on is the new facility. If we can find a property that's within a very close radius of downtown, we'll start to bring that to the board and say we want to purchase X, Y, and Z kind of thing. So that's pretty much this year's strategy of where we're headed. And then looking kind of more in a past, if this would move. Can you move a slide, Denise? My thingy is not working. There it goes. Point it this way? Got it. Thank you. So we're on our last year of our last 5-year short-range transit plan. The overall goals of that was to focus on service with best opportunity to increase ridership, focus on our high employment residential densities, and the concepts basically were the bus rapid transit enhancements, which obviously we launched the Lincoln line, we launched the extension of the Virginia line. We wanted to reduce the number of routes going through 4th Street Station. That ended up working in the sense that we were able to move a route out, give us some additional bay that we needed at the station, but the concept did not work as well as was planned or as well as the public kind of thought they wanted it. Right now, we do a whole lot of a service where you'll come into one of our transit centers, transfer, and move on. The idea of that was to do a little bit more on-street. So since we have rapid-to-rapid 10-minute service, you could go in and you could transfer at one of the stations on-street, which would actually shorten the travel time. Unfortunately, our riding public did not like change and was not excited about that. Therefore, they did not utilize it. They still wanted to go into the station and come back out. So we'll continue to look at that with the next set of consultants and see if we abandon that idea completely or we bring back a modified version of that. The interlining of routes is a scheduling exercise, which ended up saving us a significant amount of money to basically certain cycle times of routes change over time with traffic and development and so on, and you don't have enough time to go point A to point B. But you start adding point A to point B to point C to point D of mixing in different routes, you can then recover on those kind of times. And it allows you not to have to add more resources. So that actually worked really, really well, and we were very fortunate. That was a great concept. It saved us a lot of dollars and manpower. We focused on improving on-time performance, which we've done. We've run around 90% for the last 6-8 months straight, which is a great number industry-wide. It's very hard to achieve on a fixed route side, so we're very proud of that. And then, of course, demonstrated the new shuttle opportunities, which ended up being our flex rides. Those actually went very well and has become a big part of our toolbox. So where do we go next is our next short-range transit plan, which we're calling the Transit Optimization Plan Strategy, or TOPS. And basically, we're looking at the next 5 years. What are we going to do? How much money we're going to have? What does the public interested want? What's changed in the way of demographics and development? What connects to our services? How do we compare to other agencies similar size as us? Is there things that somebody else is doing that we should be doing? What can we learn on that? We currently have a consultant review going on right now. We hope to select one shortly and bring that to you. And this will kick off in July as a study. Basically, it comes down to 3 recommendations depending on our financial situation. Once they kind of do a deep dive into that, it'll be a kind of a status quo, a service expansion, or a service reduction based on our financial situation. And then finally, in the RTP, we had some long-term unfunded transit visions that we heard from the public. And one is extending the Virginia Rapid down to the Summit Mall as development and such grows in that area. Extend Rapid further on West Street, which is our Lincoln line, out towards Keystone and beyond slightly, as that also develops. We also have obviously our new transit operating facility, which hopefully financially everything works out well, and a good 5-year term we'll have the funds prepared for that. And then focus on increasing the frequency and span of service our existing high protective service. So basically that's services that we have out there that are getting good ridership, but we've never been able to spend or get enough dollars to move it from, say, a 60-minute to a 30-minute, which is kind of deserves for good high-quality service, which will gain you more ridership and be more usable for those patrons. And we still have a handful of routes that are in that situation. And that ends my presentation. Gladly chat about it.
Can I interrupt one moment? I just want to let you all know that there's about a 30-second lag time on YouTube, so maybe pause between sentences for a second. I'm trying to get that worked out.
Okay. Okay, I do have some questions. Some of it's tied back to the money we will be getting from the next round of stimulus, which is how much?
Could be upwards of 19 or 20 million.
Okay, and we'll need to know at a future meeting kind of what those restrictions are on that, what we can use it for. Certainly something I know that we've discussed at length. I mean, when you look at RTC and our rider options, between flex, access, van pool, and senior ride, are we looking at the platform technology-wise that best serves and moves those assets, looking into the future in the best and most user-friendly, accessible way? There's different ways in which people need to sign up for and access every one of these.
Correct.
And if I'm an end user, that's confusing or maybe clunky for me, right? But if I know I can look at a single app, have multiple options, put in my criteria, where I'm going, what my situation is, it can tell me the the best, the soonest, the most efficient for me. I think we need to be looking at how we are technology-wise in an app form. If we're looking at increasing ridership, this is not going to get us there. When you have 4 different platforms, you got to call one, you got to email another, you got to wait. That's not super efficient, and it's not going to get us where we want to go. And the other thing is, if we're looking to get people to move to some of our more unique flex rides, I think change is always a difficult one. Nobody likes change, and unless and until you've used it and experienced it, you don't understand fully the value of it. And I think we need to do a more expanded job, and maybe the CARES Act funding can help us get there, on how folks can do that. And meaning, when I was down at 4th Street Station and we were going up to the ribbon cutting, and I understand it was a new route for the new rapid up North Virginia, experienced riders were confused. They were experienced riders, and they were confused. 2 people got on the bus, the wrong bus, and they had to get off. Now, I understand that was a very first time, maybe there was some signage that was wrong. I almost think we need, if we're gonna do something new, a new route, a new process, we need to have on-the-ground navigators to help these folks, because we wanna make it the most inviting and easiest process possible. And I think of the students at UNR. I tell you what, that's 25,000 student and faculty that I don't think we have done a good enough job of them having an experience and the convenience of riding one of our platforms. Because once they do it once, they're gonna understand, I don't have to have my hands on a wheel, I can have it on my phone. You mean I can ride the bus all the way to wherever, and I can still chat with my friends and all that sort of thing? I think we need to really expand our attraction to the student population from a convenience standpoint, in a creative, experiential way, not just a have-to way to get from point A to point B, but as in a convenient, enjoyable experience. And I think we can get there with some of our efforts. I do think it's all on the educational side. I really do. I think we've got the assets. I think we've got the desire. FlexRide is a perfect example of us stepping into a technology that many others haven't even started. I think we just have to lead in showing folks the experience and how inexpensive and enjoyable one of our transit options can be.
Yeah, actually, on that, a couple of points. It's an excellent point. Pre-COVID, we actually did that with the UNR. We actually brought a bus up and had a bus ride day for what the new service is going to look like. Obviously, we wanted to do much more of that. It's been difficult with COVID, but we're hoping to really kind of ramp that back up this summer and let people kind of get out and experience it in a safe and controlled, with student faculty and such available. So they were actually very helpful to coordinate that and run that before. So I think that's a really, really good point. The other is our TOPS, our next 5-year plan, which starts in July. They've been tasked to do exactly what you're saying, is look at the different applications and how they do it and how our service is laid out, and is there a way to kind of bring things together and make choices. We do have some that are just happening anyways, as our next bus system, which basically tells you live where a bus is and when it's coming, is now, I think, called UMO, so you can pull down that app. It's basically evolving into more of a robust, so when you pull it up, it'll say, what bus is by you, but also you can click on Uber, you can click on Lyft, and we can add more things into that. So I think we're headed where you want to go, but you're spot on that that's where we need to go.
Yeah. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I think you're correct. One of the populations that I'm terribly concerned with is seniors, and how they would be able to utilize these things. I know in my own family it was a challenge for us. In fact, to the point when my dad passed away, he did not want one and only carried a flip phone, and that was purely to make phone calls. So I don't know how we approach that. I don't know how we get them integrated into that. I mean, as the population ages, I think it's going to be easier because, they will have, those of us who will age in will have dealt with these things forever and understand the process, but I think that there's a challenge, and I like this idea of having people there to help, and maybe even what we do is we go to senior centers. We send them out to our senior center here, the one over on Richards Way. We send them to those places where seniors congregate, and maybe we can even get some free time on the senior program. I'm trying to think of Aging and Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, we just recently did Agent Out, but when we did the first Sparks Flex Ride, we were able to go to the senior centers and actually do a training, and then
Okay.
I also did pop-up events where the major transfer spots and where people are using the service and train them how to use. But it's still, on the flip side, 60% of the people still call in.
Right.
It's a hard, as you pointed, change is tough. We always have to have that backup. Yes, they'll get a more rich experience if they can use the smartphone, but they'll get their service they need if they call into our call center. And we always want to have that as a backup side of it.
It'd be interesting to track that population just to see how much interaction and the way they're interacting with us. I don't know how we do that, without infringing on someone's rights, but it might help us to morph our service into something that's more user-friendly.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Maloney.
Thank you. I think, do we have anything else on this? I think you're kind of hearing, I guess my point is that if we're going to get to the point of doing a big push in the future for ridership possibilities, just as Commissioner Hartung said, we shouldn't be saying, well, if you want a flex ride, you go to this app. And if you want a van pool, you go to this app or you call this number. Or if you want an access or a senior ride, we can't do that. There's got to be one platform that we can push out from a marketing campaign that is bold and clear and doesn't give 16 options. And I think we're going to have to dedicate some resources to pull that all together. I understand that's a big elephant to eat, but I think that should be a priority. So.
And if I may, Madam Chair, use Occam's razor. The simplest answer tends to be the correct one. We have a tendency to really want to make things very complex. I can cite lots of instances in this organization and certainly outside organization in government where it's just so complex to navigate the system. Ask people about navigating DETR. You know what I mean? So let's try our hardest to, make it as user-friendly as possible and the simplest answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. I think the narrative and the discussion you just had is very important for us to take back and look at the TOPS plan. So when you see that come back, that's where we'll be addressing and responding to the things you brought up today. But that was kind of a flavor of what I think would be most beneficial for us is for the board to present issues and things we need to be looking at. So thank you for that. At this point, we'll move on to the street and highway presentation. And we're running a few minutes longer than I had planned, so Brian's going to make up time.
Oh, yes. Good morning, Chair Jordan, Vice Chair Lawson, RTC Commission. I'm Brian Stewart, the Director of Engineering. Getting used to this mask and the microphone. It's been a year since we've been, in person in front of you. So I'll get into it, try to make up a little bit of time, but if we're ready to get into the pavement and dirt, here we go. With this meeting being a workshop, my intent is to hear from the commission. Therefore, I don't have a whole lot of slides. Quick background of our tentative FY 2022 budget, a preview of the RTP expenditures for the street and highway program, and projects we've completed in calendar year 2020. And we'll see what will happen in construction this summer, and finally, a quick discussion of some of our major programs and major things that we're doing. And I don't know if we can get the other side off of there, but I will continue. As we develop our spending plan and our need for the 12 months that make up FY 2022, we have a very robust effort The categories shown here align with the regional transportation plan and the priorities set by this board. We have a majority of our effort in 22 on capacity projects, as you can see, with construction beginning on Lemon Drive, Segment 1 as an example. We continue to focus on our pavement preservation, making significant investment into our existing infrastructure. The large multimodal project beginning construction this year will be Audie Wells, providing a large investment into the corridor that serves many businesses and residents. As a continued effort, we will continue constructing bus stop improvements that provide better mobility for everyone, whether it's bike, pedestrians, and the ADA program. Traffic signals and intelligent transportation systems will continue under FY22, providing less delay, less driver frustration. And then, as always, we must pay our debt services. Looking into the future, the street and highway projects present a good balance of projects in the next 5-year horizon. The graphic shows the RTP and the projects that are aligning out of the RTP, of which would be into the street and highway program in those first 5 years. We're continuing to take care of our transportation infrastructure through our pavement preservation and ensuring our corridors support other modes of transportation. Some larger capacity projects will be delivered, including during this time frame of 21 through 25, including Sparks Boulevard widening and Segment 2 of Lemon Drive.
Brian, can I ask a question? If you pulled those last two pie charts up, I'm just trying to understand why the color differences for, is there a reason why multimodal on one is orange and multimodal on the other is green?
No, it's just the way we selected it out of the PowerPoint.
There's no correlation with the colors?
No.
Okay, just trying to make sure. Thanks.
No worries, thank you.
You have a question on this, Madam Chair? So go back, Brian, if you would, and I'm sorry to, pesky commissioners asking questions and screwing up your time schedule. You have bike, ped, and the same?
The bike ped and ADA is more of a spot improvement out of the RTP. So what we've done based on this board's direction is the bike ped ADA, we've really focused that expenditure on the bus stops, ADA compliance and mobility, and improving that for the next fiscal year. So it's really spot. The multimodal is more like a larger project, such as Audie Wells. It's providing those corridors for those different modes of transportation. So that's the difference between them, is one's smaller, more spot, the other would be the bigger projects.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
One major challenge RTC continues, our important investment into our community, into our street and highway program, is the reduction of the fuel tax, or the fuel gallons sold in Washoe County. It is shown over the next few years and into the longer future that less fuel will be sold in Washoe County. This reduces our revenue for our important projects. So the reasons we're seeing this, most of you probably know this already, but we have more efficient vehicles. We have people working in different environments, such as telecommuting. We also have the electric vehicle that is, not using any fuel whatsoever. So this is something we need to really think about as we move forward and continue, with our street and highway program, that the fuel tax won't be there all the time.
Madam Chair. So have we talked about having legislation? I know the governor has been tracking, but, and this is already being tracked. Every time you smog your car every year or register your car, you have to put down a mileage. Are we tracking the mileage? Because that's really more of a solid indicator, not the gallons that are sold. And maybe at some point, we abandon the RTC5 fuel tax and we go with just a straight model where we use mileage of how many miles people are traveling and registering their vehicles in Washoe County.
If I may, Madam Chair. That is definitely a big topic at the state level. And as I understand it, there's legislation coming through this session that will deal with it, but one of them specifically is to empower or direct NDOT to explore how we use road user charges, which is the industry term for what you're talking about, Commissioner, which is really, charging based on use.
Yeah, and
Transfer
again, I
back
mean, ultimately what you do is we just abandon our TC5 gas tax and roll it over into something completely different, so that you're not essentially taxing drivers twice for using an ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine vehicle, versus an electric vehicle.
I think it's common belief that that's the best source moving forward. I will represent that. The way we've been talking about it as your staff is that it needs to be a smooth transition, not a cold change, because that's the one that concerns us, to move from one to the other immediately without fully understanding the intricacies of collecting money that way. So we're there, we understand what you're saying, and that's certainly a way or a place we will stay engaged with the state on.
Okay, or on, well, but a lot of people charge at home, but if you have charging stations, there may be some way to, tax a charging station along the way. I don't know, because I think Teslas are all free, but there's got to be a way to recover those vehicles being on the road. And by the way, those dang things weigh a lot more and are probably far more damaging to a roadway than, a regular vehicle, just because of the enormous weight that they carry. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If I may add one thing on that point, Commissioner, also, we also have to keep in mind the debt services, and that we did use RTC5 and bonded and move forward. So that's always a challenge when we move forward, and make sure that's in the back of our mind, that we're, have that as we figure this out. So looking in the mirror, during a very difficult and challenging year, RTC was able to deliver a large group of projects. On the slide in front of you, you'll see some important projects that we were able to deliver during the 2020. With the flagship of Virginia Street BRT, a huge project, huge investment into our community, and we were able to celebrate that opening here last week, and want to continue that celebration as Midtown and this new service provides that all the way up to UNR. So.
Could I ask a question on that?
Yes.
So this kind of ties back to sort of the opportunity for increased ridership, and I know I've been very vocal about us having a proper party to celebrate the completion of the Virginia Street project when the COVID restrictions are lifted and we can all get together physically again and celebrate. That could be a really good opportunity for us to unveil some new way of riding, of access to our platform of options for riding, exposure to the UNR students. That really could be an opportunity for us to make a splash, for lack of a better term, is when we do officially properly unveil the Virginia Street project, which I envision as a closing down of the Midtown streets to celebrate all the great stuff that happened there. But maybe that's tied together. And I did have a question. When you look back at the pie charts, and I know from a jurisdictional perspective from the city of Reno, when you look at the pavement preservation, which is always something from a local perspective that we look at closely because it's a very expensive ongoing one, can we explain the difference in the percentages? This is why I'm going back to the colors, because the colors change and it's throwing me off. Pavement preservation seems to have decreased in the 2021 versus in the 2021 to 25 RTP. Am I looking at this correctly?
Yes, you are looking at this correctly. So that snapshot in time in 2022, for street and highways, we have to, it is a fiscal year number up there, which I know all your agencies, you understand that, but construction falls right in the middle of it. And so our projects, the minimum of 2 years, but sometimes 3 and 5 years, will fall in that investment in one fiscal year, maybe more than another. So as you design, you don't, spend as much money, you do the big capital investment, and it falls into that fiscal year that you're actually doing the construction, and then you may do some wrap-up into the following fiscal year. So that's why you see the
Percentage difference?
the
So it's not as
percentage.
if the pavement preservation is going down from 22 to 14, it's just where the major project pavement preservation fell.
That's exactly right.
So comparatively, the priority of pavement preservation remains consistent? Is that fair?
That is a fair statement.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks for the clarity.
So I switched to calendar year instead of fiscal year, just for my mind. I apologize, but this year we'll see a lot of construction going on. RTC will be out there with the yellow cones and our contractors and doing a significant amount of work, which you see here on the slide in front of you. Some of the real major ones is the Lemon Drive Segment 1. Audie Wells is a huge investment there with a partnership with our state partner, NDOT, as we build that diverging diamond interchange on that. And then obviously we continue with our pavement maintenance side, which is the slurry, and getting nearly or over 150 miles of roads done. Yes.
Sorry, my apologies if I'm consuming everything. So the bus stop ADA improvements. So I know this board has been very vocal and very adamant about doing ADA improvements at our bus stops to ensure that those using the bus stops have an appropriate platform, and if a bench is merited or if it needs some sort of sheltering. That still remains the same, but I do wonder if the prioritization of the bus stop improvements should be ordered in the manner of volume of usage. And why does that matter? That matters because technologies, I can imagine, will catch up and potentially replace some of the lower usage bus stops with some of the flex ride, on-demand stuff that we're moving towards. And I think the last thing we want to do is invest big dollars in bus stops that could be obsolete in a very short period of time. So I don't know how the other members feel about that, but I just want to make sure that when we are doing all these, and I know we said go out and fix all of them, how are we prioritizing the improvements in the event technology catches up and replaces some of them? Okay, that's all.
Great point. The current plan is exactly that. We've looked at ridership. We've looked at the locations of where these are and moving forward with those most important ones. So you should see in the next couple months, advertised and awarded a construction contract for 35 to 40 of those, and then later in the fall, another 35 and 40. So from then, great point, and we will continue to listen and look at those priorities as technology and things change. So continuing projects, this fiscal year, we will continue the design for major projects that will be delivered soon. We will continue the pavement program yearly as slurry seals over 150 miles each year. We'll continue to design and construct ADA pedestrian connectivity at our transit stops and routes so you can easily maneuver between the systems. Segment 2 of Lemon Drive will be refined and finalized so that capacity needs are met, providing a reliable and connection to the northern communities. A high-quality bicycle facility will continue to be designed for Center Street, connecting the Midtown to the University of Reno. 2 bridges that comprise the Arlington Bridge project will be designed to service the transportation needs of our region, providing safe access across the Truckee River. Sparks Boulevard design will continue to provide an additional lane in each direction between Gregg Street and Bering Boulevard. Phase 1 of Pyramid Highway widening, led by NDOT, but with majority of financial support from RTC, will continue to be designed and constructed, anticipated for 2023. And finally, a complete street design will continue to be worked on for West 4th Street between Stoker and Evans, setting up an opportunity for maybe BRT expansion in the future.
Before you get off that slide, Brian,
Too fast for you, sorry.
yeah, you're trying, but I'm not going to let you get away. So a couple of things. Mr. Thomas, you and I have talked about a third lane from Ingenuity to Egyptian, which is essential. If we don't get that in fairly soon, and a lot of the pieces are already there, that's why it just makes so much sense. It's really just connecting some of the dots. We've got a piece that goes from the Shawnee-Va Hall Road all the way to West Calle de la Plata. From West Calle de la Plata heading south towards Egyptian, there's probably already 1,000 or maybe 1,500 feet of that done. That's an acceleration lane. And then just the one that would come off of Ingenuity to the north, there is nothing there, but there's a lot of truck traffic. But also that segment of the highway from the end of the Spanish Springs Valley to, we'll call it Egyptian, it's a 2-lane road. And there is so much growth going on out in Spanish Springs, and not just in the incorporated Sparks areas, but the unincorporated area. We've got a lot of subdivisions that are planned. They're on the books. We've got to deal with that sooner rather than later. And I don't know how to continue to ask for this. Perhaps what we can do is, maybe Mr. Thomas, maybe we could do the design and have that in front of NDOT and ready to go. Maybe there's some, I know we're supposed to get $4 billion, and so maybe we could convince one of our legislators. In fact, I had a conversation with one of the legislators this weekend over on Sunday, and I'd like to talk to staff afterwards because he would like more information on that section of the road, and he needs it fairly soon. So those are some of my concerns. And then, of course, the whole of Pyramid Highway. I mean, I know we're dealing with Phase 1. Honestly, Phase 1 should have been done when we did Pyramid and McCarran. That piece, taking that third lane all the way to at least Disc, and now we're taking it to Los Altos, that should have been done when we did Pyramid and McCarran, and I begged Lee to do that. And the models demonstrated that it wasn't necessary, but I'm telling you, it's broke. I'll drive it with you any day of the week and demonstrate to you that section is broke. So I'm glad we're doing it. But we've, at RTC, and I'll get off my box here, we go back and we put Band-Aids on constantly instead of doing it ahead of time, and it really frustrates me. It frustrates me immensely because we do these great projects, but if we just would take it just a little bit further, it wouldn't, and it's gonna, we could have gone all the way to Disc Drive and maybe even to Los Altos for maybe another $8 or $10 million when we did it, and now we're spending over $20 million to do it. So it's all it does is cost us more to retrofit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And to Commissioner Hartung's point, I think we have an opportunity now, and I certainly identify 2 distinct areas. One is the Pyramid Highway area, the other is Verdi, where we pretty much know now the developments that are planned or will be coming in. So looking to the future from the 30,000-foot level as to particularly the capacity needs as those developments come in, how are we being proactive versus reactive when that's very expensive and there's property acquisition and it's a pain? How are we, in those 2 instances in particular, when we can see what's coming, how do we better address that on the front end versus the reactive? And just, revisioning how we maybe do some of these capacity roads.
And if I might, just to respond to the comments, we've heard, and that's why we're having this workshop, what your concerns and interests are. And when we bring forward the RTIP, I think that'll be the right time to look at these issues in terms of where we place particular projects and the funding over the next 5 years.
Madam Chair, one other thing. I made some notes, not for District 4, not for my district, but for Commissioner Lucy's district, because he's not here. At some point, we probably really need to do a road safety audit on Veterans Memorial from South Meadows to 431. That roundabout down there is it's just craziness. And I know a lot of people have complained about wild horses. And then there's been some asks of some of these folks, and I don't know whose responsibility this is fencing off of Veterans Parkway near the roundabout on the south end to keep horses off of that section of the road. Those are just a couple of the items. I'll leave some of these until later. Thank you.
So the continued work program update, over the next fiscal year, we'll be working on defining the scope for RTC projects, providing clear roles in what the improvements and elements inside the transportation corridor are included. This will be through the street and highway policy update. We'll also explore detailed project specifics in what we call ICAs, or the interlocal cooperative agreements, and open to hearing from the board on ideas to better control project scopes, including the complete effort for road reconstruction projects. We have seen the cost per square foot increase from $12 per square foot when we estimate to over 20. Limits on how much we can do, how many lane miles we can do with that cost increase. Part of the increase is expected through inflation, but most of the increase is due to the scope, including more sidewalks, landscaping, and sometimes lighting in our projects. Also, the RIF, Regional Road Impact Fee, 7th edition, will take a significant effort in 2022 to complete. There are areas where the General Administrative Manual requires updating, including some of the capital improvement projects listing, protest procedures, and eligible reimbursement for project costs. The federal funding process is changing quickly and rapidly, keeping up with it, but our number one priority for community project funding is a new term they're using instead of the earmarks, is Arlington Bridges. It's set up. We need that federal partnership through FHWA as well as the Corps to ensure we keep that project moving along. In addition, we'll continue to prepare for our 2023 projects, which is our pavement preservation. We start those designs and start moving those forward so that in the next calendar year, we'll have a whole slew of more projects going. So I thank you, look forward to your input and any questions you might have.
Director Thomas, is this the right opportunity to talk about our communications as it relates to projects? Is this the right time? I saw I wasn't sure if this was the right.
I think communications in general or specific projects.
Well, I'll give an example. So Virginia Street was a good example. And I think RTC does a tremendous job of facilitating community meetings, right? We can point to, on any project, dozens and dozens of community outreach meetings where you show the project, you show its preferred alternatives, you show, all of those things. What we don't do a good job of, and that the Virginia Street project was a great highlight of, is closing the loop back with those that participated in those public meetings as to what is, more particularly, what is not going to happen. As an example, so someone may attend an RTC 2 or 3 public meetings and you're talking about the benches or the trees or the art or the left turn lanes or whatever it may be, and everybody puts their stickers up on what they want and everybody has a great discussion. Many will leave that meeting believing that their suggestions, ideas, wants are going to then be incorporated in and be a part of the project. That's not always the case. We don't always close the loop back with those individuals or those groups to say, you wanted a spruce every 10 feet on the sidewalk. You can't have that, and here's why. We need to do a better job of that, because Virginia Street, a number of people came out of a number of those meetings believing something was happening. A diagonal parking was happening. A one-way street was going to be converted to a two-way. a certain volume of benches or artwork were going to be included. And that didn't maybe translate exactly as they thought. We just have to be the ones that go back and deliver, even if it's bad news to them, we have to deliver that news, because I don't want anybody coming out of these meetings that they have spent their time participating in, believing one thing, and then thinking we aren't following through when in fact, maybe they weren't in the majority of the desired thing, or we couldn't do it for some engineering reason or funding reason or whatever. We need to do a better job of closing the loop, even if it's delivering not so great news.
And Madam Chair, we hear that this is the right time to bring it up, because it's a combination of the engineering function as well as the planning pre-work on projects, so noted, and we will be addressing that.
Yeah, I think we do a great job on the front end. We just don't always, nobody likes to deliver bad, I don't want to call it bad news, just factual news. And we need to do a better job of that. It's going to save us a lot of heartache in the end. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think Amy's up next with Metropolitan Planning function.
Good morning, Amy Cummings with RTC, and we are embarking on developing our next Unified Planning Work Program. And RTC receives a certain amount of money from the U.S. Department of Transportation for transportation planning. And this process maps out what we're going to do. Historically, that's been corridor studies and area plans, as well as funding some of the staff functions with our travel demand model and GIS. So, thanks, Denise. Come on up, come back up, Brian. We issued a call for projects to our advisory committees in February. A few things were identified during the regional transportation plan process. So I want to share with you what we've heard so far, and also seek your input so that we can incorporate that and then bring the draft back to the board in April. There are a few studies that are currently ongoing that are going to carry forward into the upcoming fiscal year. Our advanced mobility plan has just recently kicked off. That's looking at emerging technologies, the influence of that on our region, things like electric vehicle charging infrastructure needs and autonomous and connected vehicle infrastructure needs. We have an ongoing data collection program. We're just in the process of selecting a consultant for the McCarran Loop study that was fully funded by NDOT. We appreciate their support, and RTC will be staffing and bring on the consultant for that. We put in a grant for transit-oriented development study on the South Virginia Street corridor, as you heard Mark Maloney mentioning earlier. Long-term, that's where we see the future of our Virginia extension. So this would be a next step in that process. And of course, the Mount Rose Highway Study, which NDOT is funding and leading that, but we're providing our, playing a support role. For new projects in the upcoming effort that we have identified or have been brought up to us, one is the Verdi area study, as we were just talking about. We know where that development's going to be, so we want to make sure we're identifying those transportation needs associated with that. You heard Mark Maloney talk about the transit optimization plan study for our transit system. Now that we're wrapping up the regional transportation plan, we'll want to do a follow-up update to our bicycle pedestrian master plan to both reflect what's been completed since that was last adopted a few years ago and update it to make sure it's consistent with the RTP. During the RTP process, we've heard for both downtown and midtown and Reno, as well as Sparks Industrial and downtown Sparks, the need for more parking, particularly structured parking. So we want to take a regional look at what those needs are, potential site locations, and potential for public-private partnership for delivery and operations for additional parking to meet those critical needs. We've also heard through the RTP process there's a desire to have more revitalization of Virginia Street in downtown Reno. Some of the items coming up aren't necessarily RTC-led elements like public plazas and road closures, and some of them are more operational, but there is a transportation element. So we are proposing that, our staff is proposing that RTC provide some funding to City of Reno for them to take the lead, and we play a support role in working through those issues. The Midtown Circulation Study, that's a follow-up to look at how things are performing with the reconfiguration of some of the lanes and lane configuration in the Midtown area. And then the one that's, I think, cut off down here at the bottom a little bit is a regional freight study. NDOT is just about to do a statewide freight study. So this is something that would be, a year in the future. Once NDOT finishes their study, we'd like to build on that so we have a better handle on truck movement in our community on regional roads.
Before you get off that, Amy, if I may, Madam Chair. So I'll add in again, it'd be really good if we could do a study, I'm going to call it a safety audit from Egyptian to the end of the valley in Spanish Springs. A road safety audit from veterans, on veterans from South Meadows to 431. And then it would, I would love to see, and maybe NDOT's already doing this, maybe the feds are already doing this, I don't know. I would love to see an audit on the ADTs out to the Tri-Center and how the region would be affected by either one of the north alignments or the south alignments out to that end. Thank you.
Amy, one of the things I know I've talked to Director Thomas about, and in, again, visioning what our future looks like with technologies and different multimodal options, looking at ways we can envision, and I look at Virginia Street and I look at Fourth Prater as these opportunities where we have invested significant dollars in the infrastructure improvements and the sidewalk improvements and in the bus facilities. How are we looking at also, particularly in these pedestrian and visitor-centric areas, the use of things such as scooters and e-bikes? Now, I know we all had a bad experience with Line Bike, not good community partner for sure, but the possibilities of that sort of type of mode of transportation, particularly when you're looking at visitors and student populations, that could be there in the future. And how are we working with the jurisdictions to ensure appropriate locations for the, I don't want to say the disposal, the parking of these things? And are they used in concert with our bus stops? Meaning, is there an opportunity for the RTC to play a role in those sorts of modes of transportation that increase, we either get a part of those, the scooters and the bikes, wherever, if we're going to put in some infrastructure and ways to keep them corralled in a safe, clean, organized way and not dispersed on sidewalks and on the streets and piled up in places they shouldn't be. But how are we using those sorts of modes of transportation to increase ridership on our other modes of transportation, like our buses? And I think there's, if we're going to put in a new bus stop, does it make sense to acquire a piece of property next to it for the parking of those sorts of things? I don't know. Just something to think about, because I do think that e-bikes and scooters, they're going to come back in some form or fashion, or something similar. And how are we incorporating that particularly in our cores, where students and visitors will likely use those. I see them in other cities. I think there's a place for them. It's not on our sidewalks. It's not in our streets. So how are we making sure that it's in an organized fashion? And frankly, we're a part of it, not reacting to it. Commissioner Hartung.
One last thing, Madam Chair, and forgive me for forgetting about this. I apologize, Amy. At some point, and maybe we have already done this, we need to do a study from I-80 going down Pyramid to McCarran. And I think we're going to have to deal with issues on McCarran sooner rather than later. and how traffic patterns will change once the Wild Creek High School comes online. That's going to dramatically change traffic patterns. And so we're going to have to really look at, where are people going to move to and what routes will they utilize and how will some of those problems, how will they affect the daily commute? But I don't know, have we done a study from I-80 to McCarran on Pyramid?
I do not believe so, not since the high school configuration has been published.
Yeah, that's something, I think we need to look at it and just, the traffic's gonna continue to grow as we grow. There's just no question of it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I also have an update on safety planning. We understand this is a top priority for the board always. Excuse me. And here, of course, the Regional Transportation Plan has safety as a guiding principle. We have a complete street approach that really infuses and grounds everything we do with the safety focus from a design standpoint. And I wanted to highlight some of the safety improvements that happened in 2020. So 8 miles of new sidewalks, new crosswalks, 6 new pedestrian-activated rapid flashing beacons, 6 new miles of bike lanes, and almost 300 new pedestrian ramps. So those are all some of the smaller scale improvements that add up to a safer transportation system. And as you just heard from Brian Stewart, safety is a focus of many of our major corridor reconstruction projects, particularly Audie Wells, Sun Valley Boulevard, Pyramid Highway. These are all high crash corridors that we're working on. I also wanted to highlight another spot improvement program. This is being implemented through our TE Spot program. And it was identified over the last year that safety in our crosswalks, particularly near schools, is something that we really want to focus on. So we collaborated with our Vision Zero partners, the jurisdictions, and the Safe Routes to School program to identify some priority crosswalks for improvement. So this can include the pedestrian-activated flashing beacons, the median island to make it easier and safer for people to cross the street. Most of these are near schools. There are some, one near a park and a couple that are in other high crash locations that were priorities for the jurisdiction. So for these 9 locations, we have design underway and are looking to start construction this year. And just to reiterate what we've spoken about at a previous meeting, we have continued to reach out to our colleagues at the jurisdictions to let them know of the direction from this board that for our next round of TA set-aside funding, there's going to be a desire to focus on safety on local streets. So we're doing that outreach now and still coordinating with NDOT in advance of that funding becoming available for us to issue that call for projects.
So, Emmy, question on that.
Yes.
So do we, through our Vision Zero work, which it was a huge effort with incredible stakeholders and a ton of data that was collected, do we set on an annual basis like a goal of an accomplishment of a something as it relates to safety? And what I mean is, you've got some improvements with the crosswalks in school zones, which I think is great, because I know a lot of the school zones were part of the hot spots. But do we set like an annual, I think the data collection and the meetings are great, but what are we doing in response to that? And I'll give an example. There was a big effort to do pedestrian safety zones through the, 2015 legislative process. I've not seen a one. Has anybody seen a pedestrian safety zone? And what that meant was in the high pedestrian areas where there were hot spots and accidents, those would be like a construction zone. They were designated or were supposed to be designated as a pedestrian safety zone, and therefore the penalty for speeding or not observing a crosswalk activity, the penalty was higher, kind of like, and I've never seen anything since that passed. And that to me should be a priority of Vision Zero to get the pedestrian safety zones launched. And I don't know where that's hung up. I don't know what's happening there. But I just wonder if through Vision Zero, does that group set an annual goal of accomplishing something?
Well, the pedestrian safety, or the pedestrian zones is a great example of how that Vision Zero task force brings people together to collaborate. City of Reno moved forward with some code adjustments or code updates to make those possible. That information was shared through the Vision Zero task force. RTC was asked to provide a letter of support for that initiative, which we did. And I believe there's some discussion at City of Reno for defining what those zones are. So it's a great example of how this isn't just RTC moving these safety initiatives forward. It takes all of the regional partners together. So that's an example where they're established by the jurisdictions, but RTC wants to support that as it's moving forward. So I think there is going to be some new movement on that with City of Reno and the identifying those specific locations in your ordinance. So that is in development, and it's being coordinated. Again, that information is being shared with all the Vision Zero partners.
Okay.
The Vision Zero task force was a big help for us for the RTP as we look at that data and identify where these priority projects should be located. So they're supporting, it's a great vehicle for the entities to support each other, both public and private sector, to identify these priorities, support each other, and make sure we're sharing that information. And RTC is a big player, and NDOT is a big player, but we're all in this together. And that's where Vision Zero really is an advantage for us to share that information.
I guess my frustration is that was passed 6 years ago, and wherever the hang up for whatever reason, what role do we and Vision Zero play to follow back up to say what is the status to continue pushing it to ensure it happens, because 6 years is too long to facilitate getting those in place. So thank you.
Thank you.
Chair. Mr. Thomas, and I'm very thankful that RTC put this aside. We asked for a kind of an extension of the Complete Streets program for the 3 municipalities to do safety improvements within neighborhoods and et cetera. At some point in the not too distant future, I think we set aside, what, $320,000 or something of that nature?
Approximately 300,000, yes.
300,000, okay. Can we bring back an agenda item that defines how each one of us, each one of the 3 municipalities can apply for those dollars and what we exactly need to do so that we understand it as electeds when we stand out in somebody's neighborhood and go, you're right, we need speed bumps here, or we need some safety improvements, we need crosswalks or flashers or whatever it happens to be in all of these different neighborhoods, how each one of us can take that information that we get from our constituents back to staff, and then staff understands exactly how we can apply for those dollars and get those projects on the ground quickly.
We certainly can do that. The way it was structured in a previous round with the dollars available were much smaller. It was about $100,000 that was divided amongst the jurisdictions, was more of a blanket category, so it wasn't specific projects that were put forward. It was $34,000 for each jurisdiction to have for projects as needed on their local networks. And that was approved in our previous round, so we're really glad to be able to have more funding for this next round that we're anticipating doing.
And again, I want to make sure that we all understand. We understand here how we can guide our staff to say, because I've got some issues going on out in Spanish Springs right now. I'll end up using some dollars that are discretionary funds to complete that, but at the same time, I'd really like, there's a whole bunch of things. I know I get calls all the time for improvements. Some are in the city of Sparks, some are in Washoe County, just because they're in District 4 and they don't know who else to call, and they'll ask for help. So I think it's important for us to understand that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And finally, in terms of legislative priorities, and I know that item is a future agenda item for us today, but Senator Cortez Masto has put forward a proposal, and we hope this is included in the next reauthorization, to make high schools eligible for the Safe Routes to School program funding. And on the state side, there is initiative to develop a committee, a statewide committee to focus on transportation safety. So RTC is obviously willing to support that and participate in that. So that concludes my information, and thank you for your input for us today.
Okay, so thank you, Amy. Now we will have Stephanie present the, we certainly can at your meeting, yes.
You know what, as the newly anointed chair,
You're going to flex your muscle to take a break, okay.
Good morning, Stephanie. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good morning.
Are we ready to rock and roll here?
We are, I think so.
Okay.
I just wait for her, Denise to bring out my presentation. I'm gonna use my laptop as my little cheat sheet instead of paper. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and give everybody an overview of our 2022, and this is absolutely the tentative budget. It is still being a little bit tweaked even before we submit it. This is just the overview of the actual process. We always start it with a director's retreat, and we did that in February. And we discussed the goals for upcoming fiscal year goals, both internal and external. Angela will be presenting those goals that were developed during that and for your input as well. Then we're doing this board retreat today. We have to have a tentative budget by law submitted to the Department of Taxation by April 15th. And then we also present that tentative budget to our advisory committees May 5th and 6th, because now we have changed how we do our advisory committees. We do the Citizens Advisory Committee on Wednesdays and the Technical Advisory Committee on Thursdays now. And then the board will hear the final budget for a public hearing and approval on May 21st. That's our regular board meeting this time. Fortunately, our schedule fit into the NRS requirements that we have to do it either between May 20th and May 31st. And then hopeful approval of that budget, and we submit it to the Department of Taxation. By law, it has to be there by June 1st, but we'll get it there a little bit before on May 28th. Denise, I'm pointing over there, but nothing's happening. Doesn't seem like it. No? Is this button right, guys? Well, while you're looking for it, maybe you just, and I can talk while you're looking. You can So next slide, please. Maybe it's just frozen in general. Try over again. Reopen it maybe, yeah. Yeah. Well, I got 15 minutes for the Fed people. I can. Oh, try again. Nope. All right. Well, you guys have the slides in front of you. I can start. Yeah. Go to the revenue one. And so this is the overall, so we're bringing all those programs together. Again, this is the overall budget. These are revenues. Total revenue right now at $179 million. Again, still our largest share of revenue still is coming from fuel tax at $92 million. That is a 4% increase, $3.7 million over last year's budget, but it does include a 1% decrease in our gallons. The one thing that creates that year-over-year increase in actual revenue is still our indexing. I've done the preliminary calculations for indexing, and that will come to the board at the April meeting. And right now, we're sitting at 1.3% increase, which will equate to a 1.04 cent increase in Washoe County gas tax. Federal funding, that wedge is $27 million right now. As was mentioned in early presentations, we have seen that the new American Recovery Act stimulus bill has been passed. Based on what they did in our last formula adjustments, I've done that calculation as well. We anticipate we should get $19.9 million from that package, but it's not included in this budget, and I will put that in the final budget. As far as restrictions on that, right now I'm not seeing a whole lot of restriction. It's actually going to be very similar to all the other stimulus money we've received, and that it should be fairly open in its uses. It will have to be spent by the end of 2024, and that's fiscal year 2024, which would be in October of 2024. Sales tax, as we mentioned, sales tax is doing tremendous. It has done tremendously well through this pandemic. I think a lot of that has to do with the stimulus that was put out in the previous packages. Also, this economy here in Washoe County has diversified ourselves away from the gaming and entertainment industry as far as jobs are concerned, that we have a lot of manufacturing distribution jobs. A lot of people still worked through the pandemic. So I did do a conservative 2% increase over this year, fiscal year 21. And that's projected out. Just so you know that right now, year to date, we are at 7% increase, which is a $1.3 million that we've received thus far over fiscal year 20. So as I say, sales tax is doing really good, so we don't really see, oh, it's jumping around now. Oh. Can we go back to we're on the revenue chart. That's the next, thank you. Lost my train of thought. Anyway, so, thank you. So on the impact fees, that's just the cash portion, $5 million there. That's about a $1 million decrease over our fiscal year 21 budget, mostly in anticipation that even though developers are still doing a lot of work out there, there are still a lot of credit or RIF waivers on the books that they are currently using. So we anticipate that will continue into our next fiscal year 22. Passenger fares, as you saw in the chart provided to Mark, that's where we're seeing our revenue decrease. That's the biggest result of this pandemic, other than the gallons for our fuel tax. The other part has been the passenger fares. So we're still going to see about another 13% decrease as we hopefully recover, and ridership does come back towards the end of our fiscal year, this fall and next spring, but still an overall decrease. We're projecting a 25% decrease in ridership, so our passenger fares are around $5 million projection. Oh, sorry. On the NDOT, $10 million, that's actually significant over what we usually receive. Our NDOT pass-through money usually is paying for our employer trip reduction program. We get about $1 million a year towards the van pooling. And then, but this year, this includes $8 million of the $10 million that we're partnering with NDOT to do the diverging diamond interchange, I got it right, for the Lemon Drive project. So they're contributing $10 million to that. So the $10 million includes the van pooling portion. We also get about another $1 million from Medicaid every year for the rides that we provide on access that is funded by Medicare, and also, as I said, our van pooling. I did want to spend a little time, okay.
Before you leave that slide, I'm sorry.
Absolutely, no problem.
So the $10 million from NDOT, so that's not a consistent number each year.
No.
It's for a specific project.
Yes, project-based.
Okay, why didn't they just do the project? Why are they paying us to do it? I'm curious.
It's a question for Brian. I'm not sure.
Brian Stewart, Director of Engineering. Thank you for the question. It just made sense, since we were doing the capacity project on Lemon Drive, that we take care of the interchange also. So NDOT partnered with us. We're seeing that as a, cost savings to package that all up into one project
see.
to move that forward.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you.
I did want to spend a little time on, again, just understanding of our historical fuel tax and where it's moving in the future. So, we started our indexing in 2010, and you see that, it continued to go up, and it's our pandemic year is where we first had in 2020, our first drop since the implementation of that indexing to inflation. And again, all of that was due to a significant drop in our gallons. We lost, tourism gallons. We had people, remote working. And I think going into the future, we have to keep in mind that it's not, COVID has changed a lot of things for all of us. And I think that is also one of the things that's going to change going into the future. That we're going to see the significant decreases in gallons. And where that's going to come into play is our year-over-year increase in the actual dollars that we're gaining in fuel tax. We'll still see those gains, and so the green is the actual total fuel tax. But the orange is the actual change, the year-over-year increase from one year to the next. And as you can see, we had huge gains, 6, 7 million, 9 million, 9 million, and you're going to start to see that diminish. So even though we have the indexing increase the actual cost of gallons, the indexing is just not going to make up enough for the decrease in the gallons as we gain fuel efficiencies. We continue to see the patterns that we're seeing, and if that holds for the future, I just want everyone to be aware that our increases, it's just not going to be the robust fuel tax that you saw in the past. The one thing that I forgot to mention too about the sales tax, so in that sales tax graph you also saw we have the 1/4 that is dedicated to transit, cannot be used for any other purpose than public transportation. Then we have our 1/8 sales tax that is flexible. And the one decision that we did make at the retreat is that we are, because sales tax has done so tremendously, we've had this influx of the CARES money, that we are making up for the loss that we had in 2020 in fuel tax and transferring all of that flexible 1/8 to the street and highway program for this fiscal year, for fiscal year 21. And also, going to make it up a little more in fiscal year 2022. So that is an additional $7 million in sales tax that we're going to put in fiscal year 21 that we did not plan on in our original budget. Any questions about that? Okay, sure.
Can you expand a little bit on what that does for us, that transfer? What that shores up or what that releases?
It's making up for, so in 2020, we budgeted for $92 million in fuel tax. We received 85. So the variance there is now just being made whole. So it's just making sure that all the projects that we had planned on are going forward. So it's helping fund all of the road program that Brian talked about, that we did not have to make any cuts at all in the fact that we lost fuel tax.
With no deficits to the other programming?
No. The public transportation program has been made completely whole. We have not cut one thing from the public transportation program because sales tax did so well, and we had all that CARES Act money.
Okay.
So, and I'm actually going to hopefully talk more. I don't know what's going on with this thing. Do it like I do at home, bang on it.
You got to get the dog out of there.
It's very scientific, right? Banging on the remote. Come on. All right, can you move on for me, please? All right, anyway, so the next slide is our CARES Act slide. I just want to talk a little more about that. To date, we received, the RTC received through that, our Formula 5307, that's how they did the distribution, is our normal distribution. They just added to it. And we received $26.2 million in stimulus funding. And when we received that, we made the decisions right away, the board made decisions right away that we were not going to do any service cuts, where nationwide, a lot of transit agencies dealt with this pandemic and dealt with the loss in their funding by cutting their service. We never cut any of our service. We actually boosted service, so we had extra bus service out there, so we maintained social distancing on our buses. We continue to do the upgrades that when last year at this time, we had talked about adding all those flex routes, because again, sales tax, even at that time, it had still continued to do well. We had an extra couple $1 million, said to the board, hey, where do you want to put that? We said, oh, let's do more flex ride services. We continued with those. We did not cut any of the flex rides that we planned, so we moved forward with those. You know, as you know, we helped deliver meals and prescriptions to our access customers, partnership with Washoe County and the food bank. We have funded all the personal protective equipment for both the transit personnel and RTC personnel. And we also made sure we funded increased cleaning of our transit vehicles, and we're continuing that into this fiscal year 22 and, you know, until, and probably into the permanent future. We've found in our capital budget year, when we bring it to you at final time, there's some things that we've talked about changing out on the bus's airflow system to help with, you know, virus control well into the future, a permanent thing in our buses. Oh, okay. Do you think that's you or me? That's me. Okay, next slide, please. So total expenditures at this time, $222 million. Again, the largest portion of that is in our capital program for the roads. And I will make sure next time I did Brian's pie charts, and I will make sure they same colors.
I just thought it was missing something. I was like,
No,
okay, so
I thought it was a great observation. I was like, oh, that's a good point. I will make sure. So if you are comparing pie charts, because Bill actually had a question for me before this presentation, these pie charts look just a little bit different than the ones presented in the Street and Highway program, because this is the total budget. Now, the pie charts presented for Brian's programs is just the cost of those road projects, which is your right-of-way, your design, your engineering during construction, your actual construction costs. These pies include overhead. So our labor, our fringe, our materials and supplies, it's the entire road program budget. So $122 million total between preservation and multimodal projects and capacity improvement projects. That's about a $10 million increase over what we had in our fiscal year 2022 budget. The debt service, as we talked about, $23 million. And actually we brought, just as for the rest of the board's heard this many times, but for you, Mr. Lawson, we have brought down our debt service overall by $4 million. It used to be $27 million a year, but RTC did 2 refundings over the last 2 years, so our overall debt service has been reduced to $23 million, and that'll be it going forward. Did you have a question,
Commissioner Harden.
Commissioner Vaughn?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Stephanie, to stop you, but, I mean, it's glaring to me. Our expenditures are $222 million, and our revenues are $179 million, which is a $43 million difference.
Mm-hmm. Yes. We are starting to eat into our fund balance. So, and that's mostly on the road program side. So
Okay.
we do have a $60 million fund balance for the road program. And as we sit today, because of, again, the CARES Act and how well we've done with the sales tax, $30 million in the public transportation program. So we have almost $90 million in fund balance.
Okay.
So
But
we'll be okay, but
40
yes, it'll be a problem going forward.
Yeah, 43 million a year, that's, that gives us a little more than 2 years
Yeah.
of expenditures at this level,
Yeah,
and we're out of money.
yeah. Well, we have a lot of stuff to do. And
No, I totally agree.
Going into the future too, the one thing about our TIP that you will see in the next board meeting and our TP is it is a fiscally constrained plan. So as you talk about the projects and the project priorities, know that that is a balance act. We can't add, a project without taking away from another project. Because we have looked at what our revenue sources are going into the future, projected all of this, and again, those revenue sources, especially on the fuel tax side, have been decreased some because we know that the gallons are going to be going down. So we have enough money to pay for the projects that we have in the plan. And so going forward, we have that, and we've balanced that, unless, and again, I have to caveat that always, is based on the projection we have today. So a project that we start 3 years from now, depending on where construction material costs go, as we know right now, they're going up. They're going up significantly. The other thing going up, as we know, fuel costs.
Cost of fuel, yeah.
Cost of fuel has gone up 25% nationwide.
Yeah.
And, we're seeing, we've accounted for that in our budget on the bus side. But it also impacts our construction materials.
Yes,
Because asphalt uses
asphalt, exactly.
oil.
And transportation,
Yeah, so.
and moving materials, yeah.
So we're going to see that, and, plan for that, but right now, we've got it all paid for, so that deficit is okay.
Sorry,
No, it's an excellent point, and I'm glad you caught that, and
Thank
that
you.
you saw that.
Stephanie, we've got our federal folks sitting in
sorry.
the wings.
Okay.
If we can zip through this last, and then if we
Yeah.
have additional questions, we can
Yeah,
come back.
we can always circle back. Again, I would just read through that, this is where we are. And I just want to bring up again, we are still a lean organization, 69 employees. Our labor budget at 12 million is only 5% of our entire budget, because again, we contract out to the private sector most of our business. And then we can talk about that pay for performance pool increase with Angela's presentation, and hopefully you heard in your jurisdictions, we actually have a PERS increase of 0.5% this year, but that is, again, in our budget and fine to be paid for with RTC. Okay, so I'll
All right,
shut up and sit down.
thank you very much. All right, Denise, we're bringing everybody over from the federal delegation. Or the federal report, I guess is the right way to put it.
So if I may, Madam Chair, the way we had set this up is we had asked Congressman Porter to start off and give kind of a overview of the DC, what's going on in DC and with the federal government, with the change administration, and particularly funding opportunities for us. And then Anya Graves is going to follow him with a conversation about the Not Earmarks program. I can't remember the new name, but
It's earmarks.
yeah. So that's kind of the way we've set it up. I'd ask both of them to give you some information to be able to better understand the situation and help us as we plan our federal program moving forward to next year.
Instead of calling it pork, it's keto.
Keto.
Okay, Congressman Porter and Anya Graves, are you on?
Yes.
Welcome, welcome, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Oh, you were there for a second and then you went away.
Good afternoon, or good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for the introduction, Bill. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be a part of the family, but I wish we were there in person and not calling in from DC. Again, Chair, we appreciate the opportunity of being with you and the members, and of course, Bill and staff. I want you to know that as a part of the team, we work closely with Anya and the Cardinal Group and Jane. And Anya and I are going to share a couple different perspectives on different issues and how it's unfolding in DC. And then we'll, of course, open up for any questions that you might have. So first, let me explain a little bit about the environment. I wished I could give you a better prediction of where it's going, other than tensions remain extremely high, and I'm going to address that here in a moment. But from a Nevada specific, our delegation is working really well together, probably the best that I've seen in many years. Of course, we like to pick on Congressman Amodei, but Mark is a friend of the family, of course, remains on appropriations, which not only is he a great guy, but we're happy that he's still on appropriations. Some of you may be aware that Congresswoman Susie Lee was also appointed to the Committee of Appropriations in the House of Representatives, which is also a real win for Nevada, and really very unusual for Nevada to have two individuals serving, especially in a small state, serving on appropriations. But Susie remains very active and very interested in what's happening with the RTC and all across the state. Of course, Congresswoman Titus also remains as chairperson of a committee under transportation and infrastructure having to do with economic development and federal facilities. That too is great. Mr. Horsford, Congressman Horsford, will remain on Ways and Means, one of the most powerful committees, tax writing committee in the House. But as I mentioned, the spirit of cooperation has never been stronger. Communications is very, very good throughout our delegation. But equally, as our delegation is working so well together and very responsive to the RTC, they're moving up in leadership. And as I mentioned, of course, with Mark and Congressman Amodei and Congresswoman Lee on approps, but also, as I mentioned, Congresswoman Titus is moving up in leadership. And then, of course, our own two senators that have been, again, above and beyond in helping us and moving up in leadership as well. I did mention tension, and I think that's important to note that it's the highest I've ever seen. And not only is it because of COVID, which you can imagine the complexity that creates, not only is it because of the health scare and situation. Of course, there's security. When it comes specific to the healthcare perspective, what's really missing is the opportunity, like all of you have, at least, although you're 6 feet away, you do have a little bit of time together to have a communication, you know, with members of Congress, with the fly-in, fly-out schedules. There's very little of that time that used to be in place for a member of Congress to communicate with other members of Congress and in the Senate as well. Then, of course, we add the partisanship, which has never been higher. But the security is really an overarching challenge for everyone, as we're watching with interest, when will the Capitol open for the public to be able to attend? When will it be a reasonable time to expect for members of RTC to come to DC to spend time with our delegation and of course, delegations from across the country? Right now, they're still staggered in their voting. It's still kind of a pass the baton to different sets and members of Congress when they vote. The fence situation, the razor wire in and around the Capitol has created, of course, a lot of controversy. One, if in fact they will continue with the particular temporary fencing. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is suggesting that there more permanent structure be put in place. But that adds the sensitivity to, one, security, two, logistics getting into the Capitol complex. From a top-line policy, and we're going to get into more details with Anya as well here in a few moments, but some of the top-line key issues to watch for, and it's kind of like, you know, I didn't have the honor to finish college, but I did my best to make sure I studied what each of the professors wanted to talk about and what they wanted to write about. And as we look at the administration, new administration, watching as it's unfolding and predicting the next 4 years, of course, top line, environment's going to be a very, very major issue. And we've been talking to Bill about that at length. Labor issues will always remain top tier during the administration, and of course, healthcare and education. And infrastructure has always been a conversation with former administrations. I do expect that this administration has been taking every step to make sure that it becomes a priority. And that's just around the corner. And that will be unfolded here in a moment. And we'll walk through some of the ideas on funding and the projects. A little bit about what just happened, to just give you a quick overview. As you may note, that the president signed into law the American Rescue Plan on the 11th of March. And just kind of a quick overview for you, top line, about $360 billion was set aside for cities and counties. Reno, approximately 53.8, and I'm sure as members of the board, you probably know these numbers, but just to give you kind of an overview of the region. City of Reno should anticipate 53.8 million. And how could I forget? Fortunately, our delegation took the lead in making sure that funding is going directly to cities and counties and entities across the country. As you recall last time, monies, and I understand it was a lot easier to give money to the state than to define, all the different cities and counties and municipalities across the country. But again, having said that, our delegation took a lead to make sure these monies that I'm talking about go directly to the communities. Spark, 17.6 million. Douglas County, 9.48. Washoe, approximately 91.45. Carson, approximately 50 million, 0.13. Additional monies for restaurants. So for your constituents, watch closely. There's going to be assistance for restaurants, and we're happy to get into more detail as, of course, time permits. SBA, about $1.25 billion. Now, what's next? Quickly, border security is now on the focus of Congress, the Senate and the House. The gun control in different aspects is now a priority moving forward. Tax plans, and then infrastructure, which I mentioned we're going to talk about a little bit in a moment. Okay, so a few things that are happening right now. We've been working closely with the communities of Northern Nevada and with the leadership of Mayor Lawson, working on the Northern Nevada Rescue Coalition. And you say, what is that? Well, we want to make sure that in fact, that a lands bill is introduced as soon as possible. And what the delegation is determining they're going to do this time is separate the different lands bills. So we're trying to work as a coalition. We've met with the Wild Horse group so far. Be meeting with, of course, the realtors and with the leadership of the mayor, with the real estate community, housing, the building industry, and of course the Pyramid Lake tribe, trying to build a solid coalition and a joint advocacy plan moving forward on public lands. Its landers, of course, Sparks, Washoe, Fernley, also have reached out to Carson. Senator Rosen has agreed to have a hearing for the Lander bill, which is what should be happening fairly soon. And in summary, just 2 or 3 key points. One, we are putting together a staff retreat specific to lands bills with the Nevada delegation the first week of April. Invites have gone out to the delegation. And again, this is to build a coalition. The other area, and then I will turn it over to Anya. I've been working closely with leadership in Northern Nevada, key leadership, and created an organization called The Board. We'll be meeting on March 30th, our second meeting to talk about key issues that are impacting Northern Nevada. As we're moving into this new Congress and this new administration, what is really going to be important is projects of regional of significance. So that's part of the goal. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions now or later, and just proud to be part of the team. Thank you. Anya?
Thanks, John. Great to see you all. I also wish I could be there in person, but look forward to hopefully seeing you all in the coming months. To go back a little bit on what John had said, well, and also I really hope the pandemic is going okay for each and every one of you, and of course for your communities. The CARES Act included some funding for the RTC, about $20 million. And I think that has gone to good use helping operate the system there. The subsequent pandemic bill, we refer to it as CRISA bill, also included about $5 million for the RTC, as well as about $90 million for NDOT. Stephanie could comment on the portion or bill of that the RTC is likely to see, or that NDOT may be spending in Washoe County. And then, as John mentioned, Congress passed and the President signed the American Rescue Plan Act, and that is going to allocate about $19 million for the RTC, and we should know more about that in the next couple of weeks when USD DOT starts publishing its apportionment notices. The funding is not subject to any prior restrictions and is at 100%, which is allows you guys for maximum flexibility, and is allowed also for operations as well as capital projects. We're also starting in earnest on the fiscal year 2022 appropriations process. And while the president's budget will be substantially late this year, we have been hearing rumors and now have some information about the possibility of earmarks. As you'll recall, they were banned back in 2011 by the Republican House majority. And while senators have not made any announcements, formal announcements about bringing the earmarks back, we do know that Senator Leahy, who chairs that committee for the Democrats, has been in close communications with House Appropriations Chair Rosa DeLauro, who 2 weeks ago announced her new guidelines for the earmarking process. She's calling them community project funding. And the RTC will be an eligible recipient. They've capped overall funding to not exceed more than 1% of all discretionary spending. They've also capped the number of requests that each member can make to 10. And that's over all the various appropriations subcommittees. So they've asked project sponsors to come up with expressions of support and describe the community engagement that's occurred around projects. And they've set up a sort of a formal process for applying online. We have yet to hear from Congressman Amodei or his leadership, the Republican Appropriations Committee leadership. But we do know, John can talk a little bit more about this, that the congressman does support earmarks. He wants to be able to have a say in how federal funding is distributed to his constituents. And then, of course, there is a ban on for-profit recipients. We've also recently heard from the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. They are planning to reintroduce their reauthorization of the FAST Act bill, which is called Invest in America. They did so last year, and I think they'll reintroduce almost the same bill with just some minor changes, hopefully in May or June. That committee chair, Peter DeFazio, has also announced the possibility of earmarks for that bill. And he's calling those congressionally designated projects, just slightly different than the Appropriations Committee is calling them, but it's all earmarks. And that will require also general information about your priorities. You know, is the project included in the Transportation Improvement Program, in the state TIP, and a number of other sort of basic information. They're also planning to have a member hearing day on April 14th to receive testimony from members of Congress about their priorities. The Senate, under new Democratic leadership, has held one hearing on surface transportation and is expected to be drafting their companion legislation over the next 3 months. And as John mentioned, Senator Cortez Masto will be participating in that process as she serves on the Banking Committee, which drafts the transit title of the legislation, as well as Senator Rosen, who serves on the Commerce and Transportation Committee. They also take a portion of that surface transportation reauthorization. What we don't know is how the Senate will rule on earmarks for the 5-year authorization. And we also don't really know how the earmarking will jive with existing USDOT competitive grants. You know, we've been successful in the past with the BUILD program and receiving, applying for and receiving funding from the Bus and Bus Facilities program and the LONO program for electric buses. So we're not exactly sure where they'll get the money from, but it could reduce funding, discretionary funding that we might apply for, not this year, but in future years, directly from FTA. Yeah, so we're waiting for lots and lots and lots of details, not the least of which is also this discussion by the president and congressional leadership about infrastructure legislation. I'm not sure, but there is a chance this big FAST Act reauthorization could get folded into what they're calling, you know, an infrastructure bill, which might include other things other than just transportation. So we have, you know, yet to understand how that will unfold. But the White House has, President Biden himself has held a couple of meetings with both Secretary Buttigieg as well as House and Senate leadership to sort of kick off discussions on what a big comprehensive infrastructure bill might look like. They're facing sort of the same problems that we've discussed and you all have heard about since you served on the RTC Commission, which is how are they going to pay for all that? And that is yet to be discussed in any detail. You know, there is a chance they could do deficit spending. There has been discussion of raising the gas tax, but I don't know if there'll be an appetite for that. So we'll TBD on that one. That said, there is going to be discretionary grant funding available here soon. We've heard already of the money from last year that just recently passed in December. FTA has announced the opportunity for low and no grant funding. And I think that the RTC is going to go ahead and apply for that, as well as potentially bus and bus facilities funding or build funding when those announcements come out, hopefully here in the next 60 days. I think that concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions you have or get back to you if I don't know the answer.
Thank you.
We've decided that we're going to start our own committee of how to name these bills because we've got the American Rescue Plan, the Infrastructure for Tomorrow Plan, the CARES 1, 2, and 3. So we're doing our best tracking what all these titles are. So I think next time Anya and I are going to help them with some of their titles, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Make it easier to track.
Confusing to say the least.
Thank you both very much, Congressman Porter and Anya. That was fantastic. Thanks for keeping us up to date on the ever quickly moving issues in DC. So thank you very much. Do commissioners have any questions or comments at this time? Director Thomas, did you have anything?
So while I mean, it's wrapped into the agency goals, but maybe since we're talking about federal, I just wanted to go through maybe 5 specific things so the board's aware. First, as far as the community project funds, congressional designated projects / earmarks, we have identified the Arlington Bridge, I think Brian said that, as our target project, and we're going to be asking for $10 million for that particular project, which is the amount of money that we're using in local funds to pay for that $25 million project. So that would be the priority project, not least of which because it's at a right place and time, and it does have some value in terms of aging infrastructure because it's one of our worst bridges. So it seems to check a lot of the boxes. The other thing is we are preparing or planning on submitting for approximately $4 million for a hydrogen fuel cell demonstration project, when that would include 4 buses and the fueling facilities to explore that. It is a grant that we had asked for before but didn't get, so we're going to repackage that based on what we know Congress is looking for to be our ask. The other more immediate things that we're doing is we are going to be asking that FTA allow us to repurpose about $1.2 million that's left over from the 4th Prater project to be able to buy 4 buses, 4 hybrid buses. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, is roughly $10 million that's left over from the Small Starts grant for the Virginia Street BRT. We're in conversations with FTA to see if we can keep that money locally. So what that would translate to is about $26 million. And then lastly, I guess it's kind of more of a question, but just something to be aware of in terms of the dynamics of what's going on at the federal level is with COVID, the federal government stepped into a space that, as I understand, they hadn't been before, which is paying for operations of transit. And that's been very beneficial to us and very game-changing in terms of what money we have to do things. So perhaps that's a question maybe for Congressman Porter and Anya, what their feelings are, but I don't know that anybody has the right answer. If the federal government continues to fund that, then certainly that'll influence the way we can provide the services in our community. If they don't, then it will put an additional stress on our ability to maintain transit service.
Yeah, I think that will be a challenging fight. I think it was sort of not just one time, because it passed many bills, but between labor and the private sector, most Republicans are not interested in subsidizing operations completely, and would prefer to invest our money in on the capital side. But it's definitely something that I think the unions are going to be pushing for with this administration and with the Democratic control of the Congress. I wanted to add one thing. Bill, you mentioned checking of boxes, and I think you were referring to, and I just wanted to say this out loud for the commission, for the commissioners, is this administration and the Democratic leadership in Congress has noted their extreme interest in making sure that projects and policies benefit those who've been underserved in the past. And so they've decided that equity issues are going to be their #1 priority. And in addition to that, climate change. So as Bill was mentioning, your projects are checking those boxes, which is terrific. It's something that your staff has been working on, but we'll want to make sure that all of our projects clearly explain, how we're managing COVID, improving the economy, employing people, addressing racial and social equity issues amongst constituents and your citizens there, as well as helping improve climate change goals.
And if I may add, and thank you, Anya, I think you answered the question the best we can at this point. What I failed to mention was our targeted virtual fly-in for members of Congress working with the Northern Nevada community virtually is for either the last week of April, likely the first week of May. I've been talking to Bill about this, as have we with Mayor Lawson regarding some of the public lands issues that we're working on. So just a targeted, now that committees are in place or close to being in place, now that, of course, the leadership positions have been absolutely chosen, with the American Rescue Plan passed, and now with the evolving of earmarks as we used to know them, I think timing is now perfect for sometime in late April, early May. Just want to put it on your radar. And as I also mentioned, we'll be meeting with the key 12 top leaders of Northern Nevada on the 30th to walk through the specifics of unfolding this with the virtual fly-in. So failed to mention that before, my apologies.
Thank you very much, Congressman and Anya, and appreciate all the work that you all do back there in DC. We have certainly been the benefactor of some regionally changing efforts because of the grants we've received, whether it was how many electric buses did we get with the Tiger grant? 17, and we're in the mix to get some more, and certainly, one of the questions I did have was through the grant process, when they talked about facilities, potentially for the purchase of facilities and buses, is that something we can use possibly for the acquisition of property for the Villanova replacement, or is that? And maybe we don't know, because I don't know the restrictions on a lot of this stuff at this point.
There's definitely a lot to come out still to find out. But on the actual, when you get into developing, it's a better shot than property. Property's a little hard to put on and go for a grant and get dollars down the road on. But the physical, design and that kind of stuff, we can definitely go after.
Even if the property could be acquired now for less than it could be 5 years from now?
That's where you've got the delay. So the bus facilities, you put in for something and then, 5 months later, you find out if you get it or not.
Oh, I get it.
So
I get it.
if we have
Okay.
money, we can find something that we can get a good value on now, we're better to spend our dollars on there and then use design and construction dollars in more of the grant kind of function.
Okay. And can those grants be used for the outreach component that we spoke about for increasing ridership, the marketing, for lack of a better term?
We can certainly look into that. My understanding is, as Anya said, they much prefer historically at the federal level capital expenditures over programs, but we'll take a look at that.
Okay. And I understand, I'm not suggesting that we're hiring people. They made that kind of clear. They're not into that. But I just wondered for the campaigns to increase the ridership for the demographics that we're looking to increase for the long-term sustainability. I'm just curious if that could fund those sorts of potentially third-party efforts. Okay.
I will add that in addition to equity and climate change, there is also, I would say, a secondary priority for workforce development. And it's something that Bill and John and your staff and I've talked about. So it's something that we're considering for inclusion in grant requests or earmark requests.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Please be safe.
Director Thomas.
Take care.
Okay, Madam Chair, I think we are ready for a conversation on the preliminary FY22 goals. Each of you we have a presentation. I think Angela's going to help me with that one. What you'll find is, and each of you have a hard copy of this, what you'll find is that a lot of what we've talked about today is captured here to memorialize the direction that we're going with your consent and advice. And what I will do is maybe just scoot through these real quickly for the public to see, since they don't have a copy of the paper. But what I'd like is, after we get through this, Angela can give a real quick review on the agency rating, and then maybe we can close out circling back to these goals and make sure if there's any issues that the board feels we should be working on when we bring these goals back in terms of activities that we do as a staff, or you would, issues you'd like to address as a board, we capture them to be able to address at some time in the future, because again, these will be formally presented to you later. Right now, they're for discussion. So Angela, okay, there they are. So as you can see, if you just look through this list, a lot of it is parroting what Brian had put up in terms of the construction projects, we're moving on the pavement preservation to try to capture, going forward, a quantitative measure of what we're doing. So rather than just how many dollars we're spending on road maintenance, for example, we would be able to show you year over year how many miles of roads were maintained or prevented from moving down in terms of their status to a lower level where it costs more money for us to repair them. Again, as you look through these, particularly the specific projects, you'll see on there ones that you're familiar with. These are the ones that are kind of in motion, and we'll be talking more specifically about these when the RTIP comes forward to you as far as when they drop in as far as funding and completion of the projects. So I don't think there's anything else on that one. If you want to switch on to the next slide, please. Of particular importance, I think, in terms of moving forward are both the Arlington Bridge NEPA process starting, which is, I mentioned earlier, that's our number one community project funds project. So we got the initial nod from the Reno City Council recently, and that project is now moving forward to community meetings as the precursor to the NEPA process starting. That'll put us in a good position for that funding to be available, the fact that we're in NEPA process. In addition, a big project for us is going to be looking closely at that Lemon Drive extension, phase 2, the northern part. Programmatically, you'll see these are items that Brian had run through as far as efforts that we're going to be doing. If I can have the next slide. And I think here you'll also see, these are a little more general in nature than the ones I just went through, which are specific projects, but I would draw your attention to the safety emphasis on Vision Zero. I know Chairman Jordan, you had mentioned that, so what we'll be doing as we bring this back is refining that bullet a little more to talk about what you're looking for in terms of measurables or outcomes. We also, an item I wanted to point out is our target would be, as Mark pointed out, we've lost quite a bit of ridership as a result of the pandemic. So we're establishing a goal of 15% increase in riders year over year, so we can measure how effective we are with our different strategies of getting people back on the bus. Ideally, we'd like to get back to where we were sooner than later before the pandemic, but this is a ambitious but realistic number, we think. And then the particular facilities for RTC, so we hope to have underway the multipurpose room over at our building on Terminal. So sooner than later, we'll be able to hold our meetings there, and we'll have the technology dialed in, so it'll be smoother, but likely to be coinciding with opening up, hopefully past the time where we open up, but that is a big thing for us, we think, as an organization, and also for the board operations. And I think that covers that. So Angela, if you want to talk just briefly on the agency rating, and then if you'd like, Madam Chair, we can circle back to the going forward kind of part of your advice to us.
Good morning, Angela Wright, Director of Administrative Services. And I'd just like to present to you, kind of a look ahead. In May, we will be bringing an item to you for the board to rate the RTC on their fiscal year 2021 goals. And in June of 2021, all of our employees will be receiving an annual performance evaluation based on their individual goals. And in June of 2021, we will be bringing an item to you for the board to evaluate Mr. Thomas on his fiscal year 2021 goals. And then just a very brief overview, as RTC is a little bit different. In 2013, the board approved a pay for performance program. And each year since then, the board rates us on our agency goals between a range of 0.6 and 1.5. And what this does is that it affects our pay for performance pool. So if the RTC does well, it can increase the pool. If under the board's direction you don't think that we've done so well, it can decrease the pool. And then a proportional amount of that is distributed to each employee effective July 1st. So all of our employees who are eligible for a pay for performance increase, everybody gets that increase effective July 1st. And with that, I'll take any questions, or if you have any comments on our preliminary goals.
That was very fast. Thank you very much. Commissioner Horton.
Mr. Director, do we have to reiterate the things that we said earlier for the agency goals?
I don't think that's necessary, because I, and the staff, I'm sure, caught everything you said. If you want to just add an emphasis, you can, but we've captured what you said earlier.
It's not necessary. I just want to make sure that, I'd like to make sure that at least we have a conversation about the goals. I mean, maybe we don't all agree on the goals, but I'd certainly like to have a conversation about some of the additions. Thank you.
Vice Chair Lawson.
Yeah, my question is this for the contracted employees or just the 69 employees?
The pay for
The
performance,
rating.
Yeah,
it's for all of our employees, except for the executive director.
so everybody, the drivers that we contract with Keel.
Not our contract, this is just the employees of RTC, the 69,
So it's just the 69,
Correct.
68.
68. Did we lose somebody in the last 30 seconds?
I don't get counted in
He
the
doesn't
60.
get counted in it.
Okay,
So 68.
thank you.
I do have a question, and I'm going to add some extra emphasis, and then I'm going to bring up my favorite subject because it all kind of ties things together here. First is when I talked about the technologies and the platforms to really connect everything together. I mean, I think my emphasis here today has really been in two fronts. One is safety, always safety, and two, increasing ridership. And I do think the priorities of getting that platform, the technology platforms to encompass all of our transit options in a concise and user-friendly manner, and then having the marketing tool to push that out, that has got to be a top priority if our efforts are really to increase ridership. Because when you look at the demographics of who our future riders are, you have to look at, the millennials and the Gen Zs and that sort of thing. And having two of them myself, I can tell you the traditional ways of outreach and usage are not going to suffice us if we're going to grow that population. So I would assume that priority would be under the transit optimization plan strategies. Is that where the technology part of the program? Okay. I think that's critically important. The other part is, and when we talk about how do we do that? What is the thing that's going to make particularly our student population want to get on a bus where traditionally they haven't? And I know my fellow members know what's coming. The double-decker bus. And everyone kind of chuckles a little bit, but I'm telling you, in the conversations and the surveys that the Downtown Reno Partnership that others have done, when you ask them about I think we need to expose those who have not ridden our transit to an experience to get them familiar with the benefits. And the traditional ways may not be the enticing thing that's getting them there. I do believe a double-decker bus that goes up and down Virginia Street and 4th Prater that shows people our economic and our visitor hubs in a fashion that they've not had before gets them into riding transit, which then exposes them to all the other opportunities with transit. And I know some think I'm crazy, and I'm not, because I'm telling you, I think the double-decker bus is truly something, and I know we have concerns about the operations, but I do think it's something that could really expose a group of folks that have never ridden a bus before. It's not just transit, it's an experience, and I think we have to shift the way in which we think for riding. So, I'm not giving up on the double-decker bus, ever. Just order it. Let it be. It shall be. Okay. Do any other members have any questions or comments? Hey, there we go. Okay. Did we finish early?
Yeah, we'll give you 15 minutes of your life back.
Oh, my goodness, my goodness. I have one other thing that I did want to, clearly I have been spending a lot of time about the bigger picture. I think there's lots of opportunities that we have before us with you, Director Thomas, coming in new with fresh eyes and looking at things maybe from a different perspective and a new perspective, having a board that is very progressive in wanting to pursue what's next? What do we evolve in? Where are our priorities? What are we doing? I also start to look at the board and the what-if scenarios. And I think we have a provision in our, is it our bylaws, that says that that the chairmanships has to rotate through jurisdictions. And it got me to thinking, Oscar and I are out in 3.5 years, 4 years, right? Let's say our jurisdiction of Reno is up at that time. Is it mandated that somebody from Reno has to be the chair? Because I'm in year 9 on the RTC. I learn something new every single meeting. It is a very complex board. It scares me that if there's a mandate that says we may both be termed out and you're going to get someone from Reno who has 0 RTC experience as your chair. And I just would like, we can do it at a future meeting, it doesn't have to be today, but I do think it's something, because we experienced it coming on the Reno City Council. We came in because of term limits and we were all brand new. I think we would have benefited from a little bit of institutional knowledge, I'll be honest. And I worry about this board, that scenario happening, that worst case scenario, and we're stuck in a, well, we have to. And so anyway, that's just a future thing if we wanted to discuss it. You'll still be here? What, you're not going anywhere? Okay, thanks, Ed. Okay, that's all I got. All right. Any closing questions, comments? No? No closing public comment? All right, we are on to item 7. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.